If you know who I am, you know I've got this new crazy obsession with making commercials at home. The creativity behind them, striving for perfection, the problem solving, all of it's just super addicting to me. This is the series where I keep pushing myself, trying to get more creative, doing harder and more complicated things, until eventually I crash and burn. This is the series where I shoot a bunch of things that look absolutely terrible and then try to fix it in post. This is the series where I run around buying arts and crafts supplies and try and make a professional commercial. Anyways, today's gonna be a little bit different. Instead of food or coffee, I'm gonna be making a mock commercial for Asus ROG laptops. If this video takes like 3 weeks to come out, it means I spent way too much time in After Effects trying to make this look good. So believe it or not, we actually don't need anything for this shoot. All I'm doing is running to the store and I'm gonna grab a bunch of dry ice. I'm gonna try and get some like smoke or fog effects around the laptop. It might be super stupid, but you know, dry ice is fun. Let's just see what happens. Okay, and welcome back to the Science Channel. If you don't know what dry ice is, it just looks like regular ice. And the scientific explanation is it's really freaking cold. But essentially, if you take a piece like this and just put it in even warm water, I think we can get some really cool effects with the laptop if we're using this. Hopefully we can just get like some of this cool mist around the laptop. It's my bright idea for the day. Alright, so the first step in making this commercial was shot listing, and rather than go with a traditional shot list, I did something a little bit different. I scoured the internet, looked all over, found a bunch of images and videos for inspiration, and made sort of a mood board. And while I was looking, I found a lot of really cool kind of techie, futuristic backdrops that people were using in their laptop commercials. I decided not to do this. I thought it'd be too much work. I didn't want to have to deal with finding textures and green screening and all that. So I just went for a solid black backdrop. So for the lighting setup, I just used 2 lights. If you're interested in my particular lights, I'll link them down below. But the cool part about this setup is it doesn't matter how crinkly and gross my black backdrop is. Alright, so I feel like this is sort of a cool learning opportunity. So right now I've got my key light right here, just a 1 light setup at about a 45-degree angle. And as you can see, the laptop background is just not black. So my first thought is always going to be to flag off some of that light. There's a lot of light just spilling onto the backdrop. So we're going to try and flag that as best as we can. Now that's definitely a little bit better, but it definitely didn't fix the problem. Plus apparently there's a giant glare on the laptop. So I'm actually going to take the key light and keep spinning it until that backdrop is pure black, or at least a lot closer to it. I'm actually not expecting to get pure black in the background straight out of camera, but I'm going to do some things in post to kind of finish off the look. Now, the hardest part about shooting products is just keeping them clean. Now, since this is my personal laptop, it was covered in dust and scratches and smudges and little grease stains from late nights eating Doritos while working. I tried my best to clean it, but if you notice any imperfections, it couldn't really be avoided. But I did my best. Normally, if you were sent a product, it would be in pristine condition and make this a lot easier. Okay, so for the most part, everything's in place. Key light here, and then it was actually a little dark right on the front of the laptop, so I added another light, and this light was too bright, so I actually covered it with tissue paper, which just acts as a diffuser, as well as, it dims it a little bit. And yeah, let's start shooting. Alright, so as far as shooting goes, everything was actually pretty straightforward. It was just me shooting the product, but I did a lot of things before I got into the editing software to make editing easier. One of those was using an electronic turntable to spin the laptop. Since it's just me, if I want the product to move, I needed a little help. I didn't want to be keyframing every shot in post, so an electronic turntable is super useful for just spinning the product around and getting some movement in the shot. On top of that, I also loaded up just a green solid color on the screen of the laptop, and this is so I can just add whatever the heck I want in post. Now, this is definitely an optional step, but when shooting screens, it's very difficult to make them look good in camera. They might be brighter than the rest of the product, or if you're like me, it's just a dust magnet attracting dust everywhere. There might be marks, there might be scuffs. So it's a little bit of a pain, it's a little bit tedious, but sometimes just adding whatever the heck you want in post is easier. And I know you're dying to know what I did with the dry ice, so what I did is I set up a light, got a bunch of different colored gels, and I made a bunch of cool smoke effects of all different colors. I threw it in the editing software, and it was the cheesiest looking thing I've ever seen in my life. You win some, you lose some. You know, if I never tried anything new, I'd never get anywhere. It was only a couple dollars, but yeah, in this case, it just didn't work out. And speaking of things not working out, editing this project was, time consuming. There's this saying in the film industry called polishing a turd, which as an editor means you're given a bunch of garbage and told to make something amazing out of it. To keep things PG, this project dropped a Chicago-sized double doggy deuce on my life. Even after shooting, I really didn't have much direction with this project, so I spent a lot of time just playing around in post. At first I tried making some Star Wars hyperdrive looking effect. Didn't love how it looked, so I cut out a laptop, slapped it on there, and somehow it made it worse. I was cutting out shots, downloading backdrops. I even showed a buddy of mine to get his opinion. But then I started making my own backdrops and kinda didn't hate how it looked, so I went with it. Eventually, of course, I did get everything to a point I was happy with, so let me break down the final commercial for you, shot by shot. Alright, so after bailing on my hyperdrive opener, I decided to go with just a super clean text-based intro, straight to the point, can't mess it up. All I did was type out the name of the laptop, put it into 3D space, keyframe some Z position movement, and add motion blur to the text with a drop shadow. Now, I really didn't want to linger on this shot. I wasn't even sure if I liked the shot, but it felt important, so I just threw it in for about a second. Now, I wanted my next shot to be a little more interesting, a little more attention grabbing, so I used a blue light leak transition to start highlighting the details of the laptop. Now, to clear this up right off the bat, pretty much every shot of the laptop had some degree of masking or cutting out the laptop. Now you might be wondering why I even bothered to get the backdrop super black, and the reason is that just means I can be sloppier with my masks and editing, and no one will ever know. For this first shot, you can see I didn't have to be very precise. I could kind of just feather my masks into the shadows, and it looks pretty dang good. Now, in hindsight, I could have just green screened underneath the laptop, but I feel like doing it this way gets some more natural shadows on it. The laptop doesn't look as just plastered on a backdrop, and it was fairly quick, so I would do it again. So the first shot spins in, the text appears, and it spins into the next shot. For the text animation, I just used something called a VR digital glitch built into After Effects. I'm not sure if it was actually made for this, but it's one of those things. I didn't feel like reinventing the wheel. I could have made it from scratch, but I was doing so much manual work anyways that stealing an animation didn't really bother me. I actually think it looked really good. And to transition out of this, I just used a black color matte and cut it up to the beat of the song. Oh, and I also just did a really simple 2-point track to track that text onto the lid of the laptop. Moving on to shot number 3, a lot of the same techniques were used. Mask out the laptop, speed ramp the rotation, and slap on some text. Now, instead of tracking the text for this shot, it just appears with that glitch effect. I stylized it a little by adding a glow effect and actually blurring out the laptop to draw your eyes to the text when it appears, and I think it's pretty cool. It's subtle, but there's also a light leak going on, which just gives the shot a little more depth, a little more movement, makes it feel a little more interesting. Kinda cool. The fourth shot is more of a transition rather than a shot. I just wanted to show off the prismatic backing of the laptop, so I just used it as a transition, masked around it to get into the next shot. When the commercial's only 20 seconds long, it's actually kind of hard to highlight everything on a laptop, so this was kind of a quick, subtle way to show off the backing. Okay, now this is where things start ramping up. So this started as a super basic, boring shot, just, showing the laptop ports, so I wanted to spice it up. Instead of just making that background black, I was cutting it out, masking it out, so it was a transparent layer behind it. And then in After Effects, I made a bunch of beams that would pass behind it. And to be honest, initially this looked cheesier than American cheese. It looked dumb. It was terrible. I didn't like it at all. So what I actually did is I added a 3D camera, added another light source to get some shadows in the shot, and then I attached point lights to each of the beams, and it really made it feel just more alive. +5 realism points for that. And of course I tracked text to each port, warp stabilized this shot, and then I had one beam, a little bit bigger, move in front of the laptop, since, you know, if it's closer to the camera it would be bigger, and that shot transitions to the next one. I try to be as original as I can with these, but that shot was totally stolen from the 2019 Razer Blade commercial. I saw it when I was kind of making my mood board, thought it was cool. Definitely check that out if you're interested in making something like this. Alright, and showing the other side of the laptop, again just the rest of the ports, this shot's almost like a pause, like a calm before the storm. It's cool, you know, the laptop moves into frame, there's text tracked to it, but nothing crazy is going on. It kind of slows down the commercial so we can build up to the final shot, which will hopefully blow your mind. Okay, so this next shot has a lot to unpack. On top of just tracking text to the laptop, on top of cutting out the laptop, I actually replaced the screen. Now I used Keylight 1.2 to remove the screen, and then I used corner pin and keyframed it to keep the correct perspective as the laptop was spinning, and it looks pretty realistic. And of course before this I had to game for a couple hours to get some footage, which I used for like literally 1 second. One more light leak transition, and we're on to the coolest shot, sort of the finale. To start things off, the shot was crooked, so I had to fix that, and then mask it out by hand so I could get rid of the backdrop. Now the background I made with the radio waves effect, bunch of keyframes, and I keyframed the color change, so each wave was a different color, a little bit more gaming, and another screen replacement, and I had a new screen for the laptop. And then in big words, I just attached some text into 3D space that just says game on. And then I did something kinda tricky. Now I added a floor to the 3D space, created a reflection by duplicating the laptop composition, flipped it vertically, and set a compound blur to that floor. And I tied this all together with virtual camera movement coming out of the laptop and slingshotting into the screen, which goes to the final shot, which is just a custom ROG logo animation I made for the end. Yeah, you're telling me kind of a lot of work for a 20-second commercial, but hopefully you enjoy it. Now, I'm not saying this is the only way to make a laptop commercial, far from it, but there wasn't a ton of resources online to figure out how to do it, so this was my first attempt. Anyways, that's it for me. If you saw this and you make something similar, please tag me on Instagram at WiniarskiJosh. I would love to see what you guys come up with. And as always, have fun, stay creative, and I'll see you all in the next one. There's something so energizing about turning on the camera and just filming and being at the end of the video, and it's just, I haven't released a video in over a month. I'm excited.